So I will be introducing Sheila Regehr. Sheila is a founding member of the Basic Income Canada Network and former executive director of the National Council of Welfare. Her 29 years of federal public service spanned frontline work, policy analysis and development, international relations, and senior management, with a focus on improving fairness and equality and on gender and race in particular. She has expertise in areas of income security and taxation, such as child tax benefits, child support, pensions, and social assistance. Her insight also comes from experiencing poverty as a young parent.
When are you going to want your slides? Okay, we'll turn them on, and you can use that to scroll through.
Okay, don't leave me in charge of technology. It'll go wrong. So thank you very, very much for this opportunity. It's so great to see people. As Mike said, he and I go way back, and there were so many people in this movement who have been part of this journey. I want to start out thanking Jessica Nolan for actually coming up with the title of my presentation, because I didn't know what I was going to talk about, and her title actually inspired me. My little biography there, I think, can be summed up very briefly as I'm a policy wonk. There's a reason I'm not a politician, and that's because I can't stay on message. So I'm probably going to wander all over the place today. So I invite, if I'm rambling or people don't understand what I'm saying, or you have a question in the middle of things, I encourage people to raise your hand and answer. I'll answer as I go along. So I'm going to go through a bit of history, as the road to basic income implies, and then emphasize at the end of it sort of where the road ahead goes, I think. But the beginning of this is going to be a little more personal. Pierre Stevens and I were talking on a Zoom call the other day about how we are not activists, or I think Pierre said he's an armchair activist. And that's the same for me. I'm a policy wonk. I sit in the background, I do all of this research, I do policy analysis. But what's happened recently with the basic income movement reminds me of an episode from my childhood that I'm going to share. And hopefully it makes sense to other people. So when I was a little girl, I took piano lessons. It was like a thing that little girls did when I grew up. I hated it. I was terrible. I complained to my mother endlessly that I didn't want to do this anymore. I also had a friend who was really good at the piano, but she didn't have a piano. So at one point, my mother kept saying, yeah, okay, but just go to your lesson this week and we'll talk about it later. So it was this constant talk about it later. So finally one day, I went to Woolworths instead of my piano lesson. Well, you can imagine all the stuff that happened after that. But what happened was that something changed, and that's because I got everybody's attention. I mean, whether you agree with the strategy or not, all of the rationale, all of the arguments, all of the evidence remained the same, but I got the attention. And with the attention, I got to end piano lessons. I had to march over and apologize to my piano teacher. And then we convinced my friend Jean's parents to buy the piano, which they thought they couldn't afford because they realized their daughter had talent, and she went on to be a music teacher. So all of this. So I want to say, my mother was not an ogre and, making me do mean things. But she was a really, really busy single parent. My father died when we were quite young. She was running her own business and a household. And there's a lot on her mind. And I think the same is true of regular people now, and especially of politicians. It's really hard to get attention. So to me, I think the basic income movement is kind of at that stage now, where we've got a lot of the evidence, we've got the rationale and the arguments. What we need to do is to really get the attention of the people we need in order to make change. There are going to be people who are not going to listen because they don't want to, and we need to get over that, I think. And it's too bad to see Mike leaving now, just as I'm going to talk about municipal level things. But one of the examples that, hi, yes. One of the examples that I would give that we were reminded of recently by an American colleague is the work that they're doing in the United States. There's this huge group of mayors for basic income. They know their main purpose is not to prove that this thing works. It's not to gather evidence, although there will be evidence gathered. It's to get the attention of the federal government. So I think we need to start thinking more about out-of-the-box strategies. So now I'm going to back up and go through a little bit of history, fairly briefly, but in a way I think that helps build the framework and the understanding of the evidence we already have and what we've got to work with now. So what's amazing is that in the 1960s and 70s, we were talking about the same issues we are now: racism, gender equality, automation and the disruption of technology, income security, wages for housework was big, issues around the care economy, employment discrimination, the changing labor market. Martin Luther King Jr. summed it all up quite brilliantly. They called for a basic income. There were auto unions calling for basic income. So we've been there before. The Kroll report, the Senate committee that looked at poverty, made recommendations for a basic income. The Royal Commission on the Status of Women in Canada made recommendations. During this period, we also got a basic income pilot. We know that didn't go anywhere, but we got pensions for seniors, and we got OAS, GIS improvements, and gradually Medicare for all of us. So there were improvements that came out of that that give us a basis for understanding that we know how to do these things and that we've done them before. In the mid-1980s, when we were going through this whole period of retrenchment and structural adjustment and whatever, there was a bit of a revival of discussion around a guaranteed annual income. It got bogged down in a bunch of different things that I won't go into, but created a very bad taste in people's minds about guaranteed annual income, which is why when our organization was formed, we didn't go with that language. It had too much baggage. Then in the 1990s, I think the key thing there, in the late 90s, but it took a while to get there, was the development of a new national child benefit system. I was part of some of the policy development in a small way around that, but I think it's something that people forget. This was developed as a federal, provincial, territorial framework. It brought everybody together. It looked at who does what best, and it made sense to everybody that the federal government does income security best. Provinces and territories deliver services and do like closer to the people type things best. It made sense. One of the really interesting things is that one of the key goals of the child benefit system was to help parents, this is adults, stay attached to the paid labor force. And now we hear all of these arguments about, oh, but income security of this kind is going to make people not work. Well, we've got a whole generation's worth of evidence that shows that that's not true. This policy delivered on its goals. It was good for kids. It helped parents stay in the labor force. And I'm a parent. Becoming a parent doesn't make you a magically different person as an adult. If things work for parents, they're going to work for other people. The other really interesting thing about that was there was never any public mention of this being a guaranteed income. Never. I know one person who heard Minister Jane Stewart at the time utter it in a private meeting, and she immediately kind of hushed herself, and like you never ever heard that. It was all about doing nice things for kids. So that was kind of like basic income by stealth during that era. And then we get to the 2000s. So this was the Harper era, further retrenchment, a lot of destruction of the non-governmental sector and its ability to lobby for progressive policy. The National Council of Welfare that I was executive director for was one of the latest victims of that. But during that time, there was, as Mike said, all-party anti-poverty work going on in the House of Commons and the Senate. There were provincial and municipal governments looking at poverty reduction strategies and looking for solutions. We were a merry little band, Mike, Tony Martin on the NDP side, Hugh Segal, Art Eggleton, Rob Rayner in Canada Without Poverty. So this really was a demonstration that this is not a partisan issue. It's something that we can all get around. The National Council of Welfare at that point developed two really important reports before we were closed down. One was on the cost of poverty, still worth reading. Tons of examples of how much we're paying now. People think a basic income is expensive. It's only because we don't realize how much we're paying now. And then the other one was the dollars and cents of solving poverty, and again highlights the importance of upstream solutions like basic income and like support so that you don't have people falling through the cracks and ending up in poverty. During the 2000s, we also had, again, it was this little band in Ottawa that suddenly discovered this thing called the North American Basic Income Congress. We all trotted off to, I think it was Boston at the time, might have been New York, met up with some Americans who were doing this, and we went, oh, we've got seniors and kids benefits that look like this. Maybe we're doing this too. And out of that, 2 years later, grew the Basic Income Canada Network. Similar period of time, along came Evelyn Forget's groundbreaking sort of bombshell discovery of all of these boxes from the Dauphin experiments in the 1970s that showed that this thing actually does work. And it has potential for enormous downstream savings, particularly to health systems, which are really under pressure now. So then the next thing I mentioned, I won't go into it, but we hosted the International Basic Income Network Congress in Montreal in 2014, and I have very fond memories of Sharon Murphy, especially from that conference. The one other thing that's not directly basic income related, but during this period of time that I think we all need to pay attention to as economics, particularly a neoliberal brand of economics, was dominating policy everywhere. We've also had huge developments in criticisms of traditional economic thinking, in psychology, in health, in understanding food security, neuroscience, all the things that make humans function well. We've got an enormous body of evidence that tells us what kinds of things are going to work and what aren't. So that's huge. The next period of time that I'll go through is 2015 to 2020. So this was kind of a pivotal. There was a new liberal government that seemed to offer hope of things being more open. We have the Ontario pilot where Kathleen Wynne championed and made this happen, excuse me, based on a policy idea. So as a policy analyst, this was like phenomenal to me. That good policy actually got put forward by a politician. That doesn't happen very often. Good policy usually takes a real backseat to the hue and cry of somebody, either masses or key politicians or people with money. So that was phenomenal. Her process was very smart. We've got that to build on. We've got the modeling that was done, that was built on. They did a good consultation process. Lots more lessons to build on. Then came the cancellation, but in an ironic way, it actually spurred support for basic income because everybody thought the cancellation, well, almost everybody, thought the cancellation was a very bad idea. This period of time, also, I think that 5-year period reflects huge movement growth. In 2015, Revenu de Base Québec was formed as an international affiliate along with us. Provincial organizations blossomed, local organizations started growing. So you have Halifax, Kingston, Peterborough, a lot of like really strong cities now working on this. It grew internationally as well, and we've learned a lot from sharing lessons with different countries. And then you've got, on the political side, all-party agreement in Prince Edward Island. Again, we're just like building layer upon layer of support for doing this. During that period of time at the Basic Income Canada Network, our focus was on developing policy options. At the brilliant instigation of Chandra Pasma, who has one of the best policy brains I've ever seen, and her basic argument to us was, if BICN doesn't do this, who will? So we did. It was a 2-year project. It was a lot of work. We were really rewarded by having some of the best social policy thinkers in Canada working with us, including the former assistant chief statistician of Canada. So it really was very, very credible work. We also, during this period of time, had really new and very vocal political champions in Ottawa: Senator Kim Pate, Leah Gazan, Julie Zurowitz, Annamie Paul. The All-Party Anti-Poverty Committee that Mike Savage was part of for a time, it was very small during that era. It's grown enormously, so there's a lot of interest. And political party resolutions proliferated, which means that the grassroots, like the average people in political parties, are supporting basic income. So they're not the issue either. Now we get 2020. Policy Options was released to the public just as COVID hit our shores. So that was kind of interesting. And then we had CERB and this confluence of things. Everything changed overnight. For me and the policy work that needs to be done, the key thing was CERB was not a basic income. It had policy flaws. If anybody had read our stuff, we sent it to them well in advance. They might have made some different decisions, who knows. But administratively, it put to rest this idea that doing a basic income is too hard. We can't do things that fast. We can't be efficient. We can't do things without conditions. And CERB proved that all of that, it was just ridiculous. We can do these things. You simply have to decide that they're going to be done. The other important thing about CERB was, too, that we were not just talking about some individuals who needed help. CERB saved the economy, and our economy is increasingly in trouble. We're coming out of CERB, and the benefits eroding now with people in some trouble. All of our organizations across the country called upon the Senate, the House of Commons. We put in briefs calling to transition CERB into an actual basic income and make it more permanent. That didn't work. Things have gone backwards since then. I listened to a news story on CBC Radio in Toronto yesterday morning that just really stopped me. Like, every time you think, oh my God, how many more years can we do this? I'm getting tired, and many of us are. But then I hear the story of these two people named John. They had different stories. One was a courier, one used to be an engineer, was doing home renovations, and they told the story of how throughout COVID, their ability to work and get enough hours to do their jobs just kept eroding and eroding, or it would go up and down. Things would work for a little while in the housing industry, for example, and then there would be lumber shortages, and they couldn't do anything for a while. One of them, the courier, talked about when he was under stress at times. He used to be able to pick up a shift every once in a while at the dollar store. And he said, now you go into a dollar store, there's one person and 5 machines. There are no shifts at the dollar store. The other John talked about in his line of work, he desperately needs his car and the ability to put gas in the car. With the reduction in emergency benefits now, I forget what they're calling them, lockdown benefits or something, he now is in danger of losing his ability to do his work, and he's in danger of becoming homeless. So you've got now people who, in the words of our Prime Minister, aspired to be middle class. They used to be middle class, or some version of it. They can't do that anymore. Like the roads and the opportunities just aren't there without some support to be able to maintain basic shelter over your head, food, and the things you need to be able to participate in society and be employed. You need all of those things. So, you know, I think we're at the stage now where we've got all of this learning, all of this evidence. We've got all of these people who have been affected. They have stories to tell. There's not that many places to tell the stories. I wish CBC had gone to these two Johns and say, so what do you think about a basic income? But they didn't go there. We got to work on that. There were books, there were webinars, we have Canadian authors, international authors. We've got opinion polls that strongly support the idea that Canadians will support a basic income if governments can bring it in. So it's kind of disappointing for some of us that COVID didn't get us over the edge the way we wanted to at this point, but we're not done yet. So now I'm going to ask Mandy to do something with the clicker that makes some things appear, because this is the road ahead part, and this is where I want to talk about.
You just press that button there, and that will move you forward.
Okay, so this isn't a slide presentation. This is a bunch of images, and I'll go through them, but I'll start here. So in 2021, we had 3 or 4 meetings maybe of a new kind of national forum for basic income advocates and allies. So all of the organizations, the 4 national ones, the provincial ones, some local organizations, and allies like people from the United Church of Canada, Citizens for Public Justice, Lead Now, joined us in this effort, and we started talking about an idea that Hugh Segal had back in the 1980s. They developed Friends of Canadian Broadcasting as a way to save the CBC when it was under threat. They thought this model might work for basic income, a sort of Friends of Basic Income idea. So we thought about what that might look like and how it might develop, and we're, gradually moving our discussions along. And then the election was called, the federal election, and we went, okay, we got to do something. So what happened during this period of time was that we just kind of went into full-blown campaign model. People had great ideas. We started doing things. We did stuff much faster than we were used to. There were some bumps along the road, but we got common messaging that presented a united front, which was the thing that the Right Reverend Lois Wilson from the United Church of Canada told us: if you get nothing else, you need that. You need common messaging. So we did that, and then we did T-shirts and lawn signs, and we organized marches. Craig Bergold is with Artists for Basic Income, and quite a creative genius behind a lot of what we did. He has acknowledged that he threatened to quit several times in this process because it got crazy, but we all pulled him back, and we all pulled together. So he worked on developing these logos that we could use. We did everything deliberately so that it would last beyond the election. It wasn't focused just on the federal government. And then we have, this is Peterborough. Am I doing that right? Yes. So these are lawn signs that people put up. One of the things that we did, I'm not sure where the suggestion came from, but that Pierre said he thought was quite effective, was we provided a $100 rebate to anybody to help offset the cost of lawn signs and T-shirts and advertising type things, because we were registered with Elections Canada and could do that sort of thing. And that really helped enormously. People who thought, oh, I don't know if we can do this, where are we going to get the money from? All of a sudden, it was, okay, here we go. So that was great. This is from the Toronto March. So you see some older UBI Works robots are here, signs, and a bunch of others. The really cool thing I found about the Toronto March was it was more diverse than anything I've seen before. It was just amazing. So we had candidate pledges. I think this is more Toronto. This is Whitehorse. Is this Halifax? Yeah. Okay, so it shows you the creative, the creative potential to do all kinds of things out of the box. It doesn't have to be a rally or a march. It can be a different kind of event. It can have an artistic focus. One of the things Leah Gazan told us was, like, there's got to be some fun in this or everybody, like, we can't make it. So some of this is fun. I think the color in our logos is fun. It really stands out. We also activated people in key ridings. We had an amazing video that we're going to show at the end of this that is embedded in here, I hope. So that's the very last thing I'm going to put up. But like I said, it wasn't easy. There are some bumps along the road we've got to figure out. But I think like this, it's really the beginnings of a groundswell that we can use to show that we're a united movement. Two other little anecdotes that happened recently, and then I'm just about done. Some more things. This is the Raging Grannies in British Columbia. This is Kingston at a political candidate's office. The things that we did to get candidate pledges is something else that worked really well. I mean, we just showed a level of sophistication that I think wasn't there before. I feel like I'm doing a lot of talking. We're still good? Okay. So the last little anecdote that I want to share, that, like, I rarely have original ideas on my own, maybe never. But I hear things that other people say, and I seem to be able to connect the dots. So one of the really interesting things that the Toronto Public Library, yay libraries, hosted was a sort of book event based on Jamie Swift and Elaine Power's book on basic income. At the last minute, they discovered it wasn't really just all about their book, but that they brought somebody from the other side so that there would be a balanced thing. People don't normally do this for book reviews, but so they brought balance in the form of someone who works with the Maytree Institute, which is not terribly supportive of basic income. And it was moderated by Heather Schofield, who is the economics editor of the Toronto Star. Again, not a great basic income supporter based on what she's written. So one of the things that the Maytree person indicated, she's a policy want to. I don't know why they would bring somebody like that in for this kind of book. She started getting very technical and into a lot of details about why we couldn't do this, about how it was so hard. And I'm sitting on the other end of a screen because, like, I was really, Jamie was brilliant. He did not take the bait. He didn't go anywhere near that. He just basically said, this is a social movement now for a societal need. We're building the movement. Bye. It was brilliant, and that really dawned on me, like, we really need to behave as a social movement. We've got all of this other evidence behind us. And then just recently, there was a webinar hosted by the Wellesley Institute. Quam McKenzie is a mental health expert who heads up that organization, and CAMH. He brought together a few people, including a longtime activist, Angela Robertson, who's been in the gender equality and health advocate for a long, long time. When they asked her, like, where do we go next? Like, what do we do to move things forward? And she said, yes, all of the things we've talked about, all the evidence, all of the nice, polite meetings we've had with people, and then we take to the streets. And the streets can be virtual, too. They can be, people said, don't underestimate mainstream media. Like, there's so much focus on social media, which is important, but don't underestimate mainstream media. So it's and. We do all of these things. And what I've been really inspired by lately, and I'm just going to go through a quick list of things, it's going to leave out a lot, but these are things that have struck me recently as really, really cool and really inspiring things that have happened. So we have more ally building. In the Atlantic now, there's both this political work that's being done with Atlantic caucus politicians. So bringing this larger group of people together, I think, is really important. Marie Burge in PEI and Mandy have been really instrumental in that. With the help of, I'm right on, hopefully, with the help of the Tamarack Institute, there's collaboration now being undertaken in the Atlantic area between anti-poverty activists they work with and basic income activists. There's the Green Resilience Project that's going forward with federal funding, which is quite remarkable, a new thing and another bit of help for us, that's looking at the connections made between environment and income security in meeting mutual goals. The fact that the lessons that we learned from the Basic Income Now campaign federally, we are now looking towards building that into an Ontario strategy to help get Ontario to pressure the federal government like PEI is doing, and not to do another Ontario pilot, which seems to be in the news lately. I think we constantly have to stress the diversity of support. There's artists, women's organizations, Black Lives Matter, Indigenous leaders, missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls reports, steelworkers, CEOs, young people, public health officials, medical doctors. We're not one by one on this. It's like those puffer fish, or when your animals, when they're facing an enemy. Like, we've got to look as big as we really are. So I see just, we need to be visible. Everything we do and continue to do is going to make a difference. No one thing ever gets policy changed, but we've got the rationales, the cases, the support, the relationship building. We need to get out of our comfort zone. We need to try new things, be creative, show our size. We have the solutions to so many problems. Thank you. So here's the candidate pledge, and there's the last slide of the video, but not the video. It's 90 seconds if we can.
Is this the video? No. Where's the video? It should be the next slide, no?
Just a second, I'll see if I can get it going for you.
Okay.
Okay, try again. That's the last slide of the video.
Oh, okay.
But maybe we can do questions while you're finding it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's just, that
Oh,
slide
yeah,
is just an image.
That's the video, yeah. Okay.
But that's not where it
That's it.
starts.
But that's okay, once we click on it,
Oh,
it will
okay.
Yeah, this is just a slide.
Yeah, the next one is the video, that's the video. Enable. Hopefully it will work. It was working on my computer, that's the problem I'm transferring.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's just the image.
Okay, let's do questions. You guys do tech.
Okay. Can I have a runner for this? Is there anybody who has any questions in the room? And we also have people online. Have people been asking questions online?
And ideas. It doesn't have to be a question. Like, there's so much brilliance out in the world.
Hello? Is it working? It's working? Okay. I want to acknowledge Senator Kim Pate in the room. There you are. Okay, and Senator Kim Pate, actually, you were talking about artists and other people who have gathered together and written letters of support for basic income. Senator Pate led the or created a letter that was signed by 50 senators, Canadian senators, and that was calling on a basic income to be implemented, and I think has been very useful in advocating for basic income as well. So is there anybody who has a question or a statement? I think Pierre does up there.
Hi. One of the big complaints about basic income, one of the big fears of basic income is that we can't afford it. You had mentioned in your talk that if we had basic income, it would make a lot of our other social programs redundant. And I was wondering if anyone has actually done a study of how much money basic income would save or replace. Because I don't think basic income is really going to break the bank. I think that it is such a feasible solution to the problems of our culture here.
Right. I think there is some current work being done by the University of Saskatchewan on this, but there's earlier work that's been done. The Ontario Association of Food Banks, for example, has done cost of poverty studies. So there's a lot of evidence from different different fields of the savings to the criminal justice system, savings to healthcare systems, and that sort of thing. It's old now, but the National Council of Welfare report, The Cost of Poverty, it just gave so many examples of money that's going out the door that doesn't provide the results. And it's one of the problems that even the Parliamentary Budget Office acknowledged when it was asked to start doing some modeling. Like, it responds to requests from parliamentarians. They were asked to provide some costing models for different things. And even they acknowledged that one of the real problems with a lot of the policies that we have federally is that all we see is the spending part. We don't see the benefit part. So without those kinds of evaluations, it's really hard for policymakers to make decisions. The other thing I would say, as someone who has worked in federal government for years and years and years, at the Department of Finance especially, they really like hard numbers, and it's really, really difficult to get hard numbers on future cost savings down the road. So the estimates that Evelyn Forget had of an 8.5 drop in healthcare costs in Dauphin when that experiment was run is really helpful, because it gives you a real calculated number of the savings. I also think we need to approach it from a very different way, and that's that we need to do this now. There's enough evidence that shows that it works and shows that the other system doesn't work, that you have to do this. Waiting to prove that you're going to get these downstream savings that amount to this budget line, and this budget line, that's way in the future.
I have a question.
Pierre actually walked all the way across to ask a question as well, but I'm just going to jump in here. And Sheila, you might want to talk a bit about your own policy options document, which is really an important document to know about and understand. And also, people may not be aware, but CCPA recently published a document on the cost of poverty in the Atlantic provinces and estimated that the cost of poverty is $3 billion a year for Nova Scotia alone. So that's a really good document to go to as well. You mentioned a number of other documents that estimated the cost of poverty. And so if we understand how much poverty already costs us, then that sort of can be used to ameliorate concerns around poverty or the cost of a basic income.
Right, so you want me to do that now then, Mandy? And I would add that again, there's this volume of evidence out there. There's the cost of poverty, but there are enormous studies that have been done on the cost of inequality as well. Richard Wilkinson and company, the famous Whitehall study in the United Kingdom was, I don't know how many years ago, that again showed that the further apart the scale is between those who have little income and power and those who have lots of income and power, it creates societal problems for everyone. Like higher mortality and morbidity rates, all kinds of societal disruption problems. So it's inequality as well that feeds this. Anyway, our policy options report. So, as I said, we decided that if BICN didn't come up with some options, who else was going to? And we wanted to make sure that they were reasonable, they did what we wanted them to do, and all of it was grounded in the kind of principles that Mandy talked about at the beginning, and in particular focused on principles that we can measure. And that's really important because if anybody shows you a proposal for a basic income, you want to know what the benefit looks like. You want to know how it's being paid for and who's paying for it, who benefits, and whether it improves equality and reduces poverty and depth of poverty. Like, you can measure those things. So those are really important. At the beginning, we decided that we weren't going to be too prescriptive, that we wanted to give a range of options. We weren't making a decision about whether you wanted the full universal basic income model where it goes to billionaires too, but it gets taxed back somehow, and the model upon which seniors and kids benefits in this country are based. So we designed 3 options. We showed how much they would cost. Our benefit levels were around the poverty line so that everybody would have a reasonable amount of income. The benefits were reduced very gradually, more gradually than in the Ontario pilot, so that you keep benefiting as you earn more until you're quite comfortable. And then we showed where the resources were to pay for it within the tax transfer system. And we did this with a very sophisticated tool called SPSDM, developed by Statistics Canada. We did that so that we could show hard numbers. But we make it clear that this is not the only way you can pay for a basic income. There were lots of other ways, but we showed where we could find the resources to pay for all of these things, including the one that the billionaires get. They all come out equitably in the end, but there are policy choices that make that universal model much harder. So we've done the work, we've set out the principles, we've showed what guided our modeling and the decisions we made every step of the way. We've shown that it's affordable. It is a matter of policy choice.
I wanted to come back to the question about the cost of poverty, and so this will be a little bit of a rambling around, but it'll come to a question. The provinces in Canada pay $9 billion annually to have something like what we have in Nova Scotia, income assistance. Now, the result of that policy is something like cost attributed to poverty in Canada of estimated between 70 and 90 billion dollars. So that seems to be a rather ineffective policy. Not only that, I want to sort of bring up another number that we seem to be forgetting, and that number I think we can also sort of conveniently maybe compare to the CERB situation. That $9 billion that we spend in Canada annually on income assistance results in 40,000 people annually dying prematurely because they live in poverty. 40,000 people a year. That is equivalent to one airplane crashing and killing everybody on board a day. If that happened with airplanes, you would see how quickly the politicians would react. We saw how quickly the politicians reacted with COVID. And up to now, we are, in 2 years' time, we are approaching 30,000 deaths a year. For 50 years, we have let politicians have an inadequate policy that results in 40,000 people dying a year. That is over 1.5 million in the last 40 years. And we allow the politicians to do nothing about it. So we saw how quickly politicians can react, including locking down the economy and so on, when CERB came. We have a man-made epidemic, and that is called income assistance. And we don't do anything about it. So I think when we come to what is the road ahead, we have to find a way to stop politicians of not making decisions and forcing them to make decisions. Because as we've just heard, there are many, many much better policy options available for us that will, stop this nonsense. So I think what I would like to do is anyone in here who has any ideas how to stop politicians from not making decisions and get them to making decisions, please, do some brainstorming, because I think that's where we have to go. Push them to stop not making decisions. Thank you. I don't know, Sheila, if you have any comments on that.
Brilliant, Pierre. Thank you. And the video is ready. If we have I see our timekeeper here. If we have 90 seconds to run it?
Yes, we do, but we do have one question.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah, we have a couple great questions from people watching online. So the first one is from Darcy McPhail, who asks, I've heard some say that a UBI would hurt entrepreneurship. Can you elaborate on how that is a fallacy?
Yeah. This one just, again, is another argument that really doesn't make sense. And I think part of the evidence of that is the fact that there are 100 and some odd CEOs who have joined together to sign a letter to the Prime Minister as well, saying this is something that's good for business. I don't know. I'm not an economist. I'm not a business person. I don't know where they come up with these ideas, but I don't know how you get a productive workforce out of people who are fearful, anxious, hungry, cold, unhoused. This is not good for our country. A lot of the argument that they think they fear is that basic income might actually provide pressure to increase wages. And for Canada, that's a really good thing, because we're a very low-wage country, and that kind of race to the bottom doesn't help us economically.
Thanks, Sheila. I have one more question. Do you think we have time? Awesome. One more. I think this is a really great question. So this one comes from Margaret Casey, and she's asking, what is an effective way or route for small groups to advocate for basic income? Oh,
there are so many ways. Always contact your local politicians. They respond to constituents better than even national organizations sometimes. Arrange meetings with them, talk to them. Organize community events. One of the, this could be a long answer. I don't want to go there. We have had some real challenges organizing in Toronto. It's been much harder than in smaller communities. In smaller communities, people are closer together geographically and culturally in the broadest sense. So you've got people who are working with you and kind of have your back. And I think that allows you to get out there and be bolder and to make your voice heard. People have gone to market stalls. One of the things they did in Kingston, instead of organizing their own march, they brought all of our signs and went to the Pride March. So find out, like, connect up with other organizations with similar goals, but be visible. Go get a lawn sign, go get a t-shirt, yeah. And if you look at the basicincomenow.ca website, you'll see more examples and ideas. The communities themselves have generated some amazing ideas.
I can change my mind.
I can change the world.
I can be myself.
A basic income lets me be the person I need to be. It gives me hope and support to reach my goals.
Un revenu de base me permet d'être authentique.
With a guaranteed livable income,
we can all pay the rent and put food on the table.
Care for a loved one, go back to school, start a new business.
I can be myself. Okay.
A basic income is a foundation for all of us.
Inequality.
Racism.
Mental stress.
Poverty, homelessness.
Precarious work.
La pandémie les a aggravés.
We must do better. We need basic income now.
It's urgent, effective, affordable.
With a basic income, my future won't depend on someone else's choices.
I can move forward from trauma.
Change will not break me.
With basic income, I can show what I'm capable of. My contribution will count.
I can volunteer. I can fight climate change. I can change the world.
I can plan and have my chance. I will grow.
Canada has enough to make sure everyone has enough. Basic income is about human dignity.
It will spark creativity and new jobs.
Vote for basic income now.
Votez pour le revenu de base. Maintenant.
Get involved. Vote for basic income now.
Get involved. Vote for basic income now.